Good morning, high school. See if I can be, that's a little more light. Good morning. It is February 7th, and we're going to kick off a new series today. And then we'll keep going through it. It's a 4 week series. It's called Do Something. So I'm excited to dive into this. This is going to be a lot about justice and taking action. So hopefully we're able to learn a lot as we go through this. So starting off, I want to talk about superhero movies and how much we love them. A lot of people are either like Marvel or Justice League, right? Like, or what is that? DC, sorry, whatever. The Avengers or the Justice League. I don't care. I like all of them. I was a little disappointed with Wonder Woman too, but like it was still cool enough that I wanted to watch it. But it seems like we all really love superhero movies because I think people really love a good hero. They really love what a good hero does. They like solve a problem, they save people, they can do some really cool like stuff with their powers and things. And superheroes, they see something wrong in the world and then they do something about it in like a super epic way. And maybe one of the reasons that we really love superhero movies is because we all love the idea of superheroes existing in our own world, where maybe for us we wish that someone would like sweep in and save us from our AP math class, or would push our college application to the top of the pile so that we could get into the school of our dreams, or maybe make life a little bit easier so you don't have to do all the chores around the house or something. Um, so we kind of like wish that we could have a superhero swoop in and save us in some way, just like in the movies. And I just think there are times in life when we wish someone would do something to help us out, to make things change, to make it better, solve a problem, just to do something. So that's what we're going to be talking about for the next few weeks. Not just superheroes, but some of the biggest areas in our lives where we all wish someone would just do something. We're going to talk about some things in the world that aren't quite right. So, a lot of injustices that are around the world, things that seem unfair, and just kind of what we can do about them. So, when we see the word injustice, what sort of things come to mind? Probably want to start with a few definitions, right? So, we've got justice and we've got injustice. Justice simply means something is right, fair, or equal, which means that injustice would be the opposite of that. So instead of right, we're talking about things that are not right. Instead of fair, we're talking about things that are unfair. Instead of equal, we're talking about things that are unequal. So that's injustice. You don't probably need me to define it. For most of us, something came to mind as soon as we hear the word injustice. We can already picture things that are not just. And maybe it's something big and global like human trafficking or poverty or world hunger. Maybe something local that feels so unfair and it's right down the street. Maybe you are experiencing a kind of injustice personally and you know the pain all too deeply. Or maybe you have started to see injustice that maybe you don't personally experience, but other people do, whether that's in the news or like around school, whatever it might be. Something comes to mind for all of us when we see injustice there. And again, this is the thing I get excited about Gen Z, because your generation is more aware of injustice and more upset about it. You're very tolerant people. You want all people to be accepted. So when you see injustice, it just Gen Z teenagers, you guys get really upset about it and you want to do something, which is awesome. So the real question that we all face is not, does injustice exist? Instead, the question is, why doesn't somebody do something about that injustice? And that's the question we're going to be wrestling with for the rest of these weeks. So, a couple more weeks here. What does it look like, and whose job is it to do something about injustice in the world? So, as we're getting started, a conversation like this can be tricky because we see and experience injustice in very different ways. This might be something that's really heavy. It might be something you've thought about for a while because you've experienced it yourself, or maybe it's affected your family and friends really closely. This topic like hurts. Like there are some really painful things that injustice has caused. So, um, we're going to work through this together. We're going to support each other through it and be able to support our friends and family through it. On the other hand, some of us maybe haven't experienced a lot of hurt or injustice. Maybe injustice just surprises you when you see it. It shocks you. It upsets you. So I think that there are some really good questions that we can consider asking as we're diving into this, like why are there some students that never get in trouble when they should, while other students who are always getting in trouble, even if they're not doing anything wrong? Maybe you see that. Or why do people still, oops, sorry, why do people still act like it's okay to make racist, sexist, or ableist jokes? Those still get thrown around a lot. And I don't, why do people think it's still okay to do that? Why does that guy continue to be bullied, but no one seems to care enough to do anything about it? Or maybe you're asking, why does one person in our friend group go home to a house that feels unsafe while others don't have to worry about that? You might be asking, why are there so many little kids in our community who don't get to eat if school is out? Why are 3 meals a day not normal for everyone, not just expected? Right? Those are some good questions that you can ask, and that's where we see injustice, right? When we see injustice through our own experience or through someone else's, it makes us ask some really hard questions, and it makes us wonder how others don't see it or how we didn't see it before. It's not that we don't care about injustice. I think sometimes we don't do anything about injustice because we don't get close enough to see what's really happening and ask those hard questions. So we are definitely not the first to have this problem. In fact, Jesus actually made it a habit of pointing out a lot of things people hadn't seen before. One of the questions people asked Jesus a lot was, who is cool with you and like who is not? Okay. They might not have said it quite like that, but they did ask Jesus this kind of question a lot of different ways. And like Jesus did in many conversation, he answered that question with a story. Jesus often uses stories with real life examples to reveal a bigger truth. In this case, he used a story of sheep and goats to explain the differences between the righteous and the unrighteous, those who are on the right side and those who are on the wrong side. Or thinking back to our superheroes, good guys and bad guys, um, like Batman versus a Joker, right? Jesus is just trying to make it really clear that there are two categories here. And since flocks and shepherds were a big part of life in ancient culture, everyone would have been really familiar with that, and his audience would have understood what he was getting at with that comparison. So, again, the question that was presented to Jesus was, who's cool with you? Who's in good standing with you? Who's on the right side? Who's on the wrong side? And in the story, the sheep are on the right side or the righteous, and then the goats are not. So they're on the other side. So, what he says about the goats right here. He says, then he will say to those on his left, depart from me, you who are cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not invite me in. I needed clothes, and you did not clothe me. I was sick and in prison, and you did not look after me. They also will answer, Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty, or a stranger, or needing clothes, or sick or in a prison, and did not help you? He will reply, truly I tell you, whatever you did not do for one of the least of these, you did not do for me. Then they will go away to eternal punishment, but the righteous to eternal life. Oops, sorry. In this story, Jesus distinguishes between the righteous and the unrighteous, and the good guys, the bad guys. And he distinguishes that by how they responded to the needs of the least of these, whom Jesus defined as the prisoners, the hungry, the sick, the strangers. In other words, people who need the most help, feel the most pain, or get the worst treatment. Now, that may seem a little extreme. Is Jesus really this mad because they didn't give someone some water, right? But listen to the level of shock that the goats expressed in their response to the king. When did we not see you? When did we not clothe you or feed you or give you water? It's as if they're trying to say, like, oh, not me. I would never do that. He hadn't been physically hungry or thirsty or in prison, but he wanted to make a point here. Not only did you not do something about the injustice, but you didn't even see it. When you don't see those who need your help, you're not just missing out on seeing injustice. When we don't see it, Jesus takes personal offense as if we don't see him. You're missing out on part of what it means to follow Jesus himself. Remember, this is a story about who's cool with Jesus and who isn't. He's very clear about the answer. His people are those who see and act when it comes to injustice. Now, I'm not saying that that's what it takes to start a relationship with Jesus, but I am saying that if you get to know him, the closer you get to him and the more you understand him, the more you read about him and learn about Jesus, the more you'll see that Jesus always cares about injustice. He always speaks up for others and he always fights for what's right. And if you're following him, you'll become more like him in that way. You'll begin to care about the things he cares about. And because of Jesus' example, you may begin to see injustice differently than you ever have before. You may be compelled to start doing something more than what you did before. And don't worry, we'll talk more about like what exactly to do over the next few weeks. But for now, we just want to start with one thing that we all have to start with first. Before you can do something about injustice, you have to see it. That's the first step. That's the first really important key. And that's where we need to start. We need to be able to look around and see what's happening around us. We need to be able to notice the injustices in our daily lives and just the ordinary world. We all have room to grow in this. So there's a couple steps we can take to get better at it. First step is to get close enough to see. So, how do we do this? Well, there's a few things we can do. For starters, we can pray that God would help us to see the way that He sees, that He would give us His eyes so that we can see the hurt around us. And then we can spend some time with people who are different than us. And it doesn't really come natural to any of us. We naturally gravitate towards the people who are similar to us, that we have a lot in common with. But in order to see what's going on in the world, you have to get to know people in the world, not just in your circle. So get close enough to see, strike up a conversation with someone in your class or sit next to someone different than you in the cafeteria. Get a job that will help you meet people outside of your school. Volunteer somewhere. Just put yourself in a position where you get to interact with other people so you can see the world from someone else's perspective and make an effort to learn about another person's experience. You can watch or even just watching a movie about injustice or reading a book about someone who has completely different experiences than you or lives somewhere completely different. I know we've got a lot of readers, so finding those memoirs, those true stories of things happening in other countries, in other states, just to start to understand the different injustices around the world. Then be curious enough to listen. So, the quickest way to actually see injustice is to listen to the people who are experiencing it. So, when someone tells you about experiencing injustice, listen and don't just like hear it, but try to like listen to understand and to try to learn. Try imagining yourself in their shoes. Think about what they're saying. Really empathize, right? Even if you've never experienced it, you can still have empathy. And this is when the conversation should get real, right? It may be tempting to kind of just, okay, yeah, that sounds bad, but kind of get out of the conversation. But if you act like you're going, oh, sorry, but because it's uncomfortable doesn't make it bad, right? It's actually a good sign when you see bad things and it makes you uncomfortable because that means that you're beginning to see things the way that God sees them. So it's actually a really good thing to feel uncomfortable when hearing about injustice and lean into that. Be curious about your own experience too. Maybe you'll notice that you've experienced an injustice, but you've brushed it off because everyone around you said it was no big deal or, hey, that's normal. Or maybe you'll notice you've participated in injustice without realizing it. And you can't know what you'll discover until you start to get curious. So be open to what God may be showing you about the lives of people around you or about your own life. And then finally, the last step is to be courageous enough to name it. So if you see something that is wrong, say that it's wrong. If it's unfair, call it unfair. When you see injustice around you or even in you, be courageous enough to call it what it is. Being able to identify injustice takes away some of the power of injustice because we can't change what isn't seen, acknowledged, and talked about. So naming it and talking about it, it can be really hard because it's risky, it's awkward, and it's uncomfortable, but it's so important because once we name injustice, we also feel ownership and the responsibility to do something about it. And that's an important step right there. So much of following Jesus is learning to see, think, and live in a way that is not really natural to us. one of the things that I really love about your generation is that so many of you actually see and care about injustice. Like you're really passionate about it and you want to do something in those areas. So the first step to doing something is seeing it and helping others to see it. So that's why we are going to be like working through this for the next couple weeks so that we can talk through these things. So as you're heading out, and heading to the discussion questions and the details below. Again, you can journal those or you can chat with a parent about them. Um, I want you to think about this quote from Maya Angelou. She's a famous writer. She wrote a lot about injustice, and she said, "Do the best you can until you know better. Then, when you know better, do better." That's what the series is about. So, we want to be able to see better so that we can know better and ultimately then we can do better. So it all comes down to seeing first. So check out the questions and the details below, and then I will see you guys next week for week 2 of Do Something. Have a wonderful week. Bible study is on Wednesday, and I will see you guys then. Bye.